Good morning. Good morning, second day. I hope you are all in good shape, rested well after the intense day yesterday of sessions, the presentations here, but also it's obvious that the dinner was a good occasion, as Professor Lowe had anticipated, a good occasion to intense and I hope fruitful conversations among you. We are continuing our conference on the Earth-Humanity reconciliation, and I wanted to give a few thoughts on why we have organized the sessions in the way we did. As I said yesterday, this is a journey, and the Club of Rome is probably perceived by many because, or thanks to the big success, editorial success at least, of the Limits to Growth. And we are privileged enough to have with us one of the authors, Jürgen Randers, who will give us tomorrow a special address. But there are more in the Club of Rome, in the reflections of the Club of Rome along its history. There are many different perspectives, many different lenses that in a way we tried to summarize, although summarizing is always simplifying, which is not what we want to do, but we wanted to make it synthetic in these two perspectives that we will deal with this morning. The cultural conditions and the material conditions which respond well to the activity of the Club of Rome since the very beginning. 7 years after the Limits to Growth, we published a report which was, for me, it has a strong personal meaning because that was the first report I read when I was a teenager. Before reading the Limits to Growth, I read No Limits to Learning, which is all about our capacity, human capacity to learn about, of course, education and cultural elements, which, by the way, interestingly, were present yesterday in the keynote from Professor Zhang. So this is why we have these two sessions to look at the same question, the same big question, which is how do we combine well-being for all, for humans, but also non-humans, within the planetary boundaries. Equitable well-being for all on a healthy planet, global equity for a healthy planet, because the two dimensions, cultural and material, are intimately intertwined. And for the first question, we have a panel of outstanding people and persons from the Club of Rome or not. We have also some speakers that are from partner organizations with which we are working, but I will leave the work of the real work to our friend and colleague, Club of Rome colleague, Julia Kim from Canada and Korea. I think we can say both, who has been actively involved since years in a very relevant project, even if associated with a small country, but sometimes the best learnings come from small countries like Bhutan and their model of development of other indicators, other ways of sensing if the country is doing well for its people and its ecosystem. So Julia, without more introduction, the floor is yours to lead us into this session. Many thanks to all of you for being here and to you.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Carlos, and good morning to everyone. I I wanted to start with just a moment to invite all of us to get grounded in where we are. We've all been traveling on airplanes and trains and buses, maybe feeling a little bit tired. So just take a moment, maybe connect with your breath. If you like taking a big breath in and letting it out, by all means. And I think when you do that, maybe you connect with your body a little bit more. Sense that you are seated on a chair. And that chair is in this conference room in this extraordinary hotel. And that we are in China. As the Club of Rome, we are in China. And if you go further below the concrete of the city, we're connecting to this earth. This beautiful Mother Earth, in which country borders and names have no meaning. Just connect for a moment to the sense of this common earth that we are being held by. And then become aware of the space above your head, ceiling of the room, up through the tower of this hotel, and above that, the sky. And this extraordinary supermoon that is hanging out there in the vastness of space. And just connect for a moment to the sense of mystery and vastness above us, in which we human beings are a tiny and important part. And connecting the groundedness of Mother Earth and the vast mystery of space is our human bodies. And in the center of that is our hearts. Just connect for a moment with your own heart. Allow that heart to relax and to open, perhaps with a sense of curiosity about this next session and about what the next few days will hold. We come here with so many questions and expectations, our own worldviews. Maybe allow your heart to open with a sense of curiosity and even wonder. Thank you, everyone. I want to express my gratitude for allowing us to come together here for this conversation. I have the honor of being a part of a really wonderful group of speakers. We had breakfast together and had a chance to connect with each other. We'll be having a keynote first, and then we'll be showing a short video clip from a participant, and then we'll go into a conversation among our speakers, and then we'll be opening up for a more interactive Q&A as a group. So that's kind of the way that it will flow. So let me introduce some of our speakers. We have Louis Klein, who will be giving our keynote. And he is the Secretary General of the International Federation for Systems Research. He's an expert in the field of systemic governance and change, as well as complex project management. And since 2016, he served as Dean and Research Director of the European School of Governance. So he'll be sharing a presentation that will a little bit frame, drop some questions into our conversation. The video will be coming from Jude Curvan. She's a co-founder of Whole Worldview, and she's a council member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle and an associate member of the Club of Rome. She's also a faculty member of the California Institute of Integral Studies. So we'll be sharing the video after Louis speaks. And then for our wonderful panel speakers, we have Karima Kadawi. She is the co-founder and executive president of Tamkeen Community Foundation for Human Development, and that was established in Morocco in 2009. And she also serves as co-president of Climate Bridges, a global network for climate and sustainability. We'll be joined also by Silvia Zimmerman del Castillo, who, as we all know, is a co-president of the Club of Rome. She is an Argentinian writer, philosopher, and international lecturer, and she brings a long trajectory in international organizations that are dedicated to education and culture. We also have Stephen Hartman, who is the founding executive director of the Bridges Sustainability Science Coalition in UNESCO's Management of Social Transformations program. He's also a fellow of the World Academy of Art and Sciences and serves on the steering committee of the Earth Humanity Coalition. And finally, we have Songqiao Yao, who is the founder and chief explorer, I love that title, of Wildbound, a social enterprise based in China and the UK. She's an activator, facilitator, and supporter for the resilience of change leaders and networks in the climate and nature field. So you can hear just from the introductions that it's going to be quite a rich diversity of perspectives we're bringing together, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So with that, I would like to invite Louis to please come to the podium and start us off with some thoughts and some images.
Thank you so very much, Kim, for the warm welcome, and good morning to everybody. I'm stranded with the task to open the day with a bit of a presentation on systemic wisdom, whatever that may be. But who's talking? Where do I come from? What are my roots? What is informing my perspective on the world? What you see here is the beautiful Moselle River in the very west of Germany, close to Luxembourg, close to the French border. This is where I grew up, God's own country. Vines wherever you look, and a peaceful river in between, lush mountains. It's home also to this guy. And born in the same city, I'm a born Marxist in a way. And it's an interesting connection to not only China, but also to the very topic and to my trajectory of life. Because Trier, where we are born, is talking of two famous sons. One is Karl Marx, obviously. The other one is Cardinal Nell Breuning. He introduced the concept of social justice to the Catholic Church as brought forward in the Encyclopedia under Pope Pius XII, round about 1940. He's a Jesuit looking for social justice and the conditions to bring that about. Well, we drank from the same well. I'm speaking, as Julia introduced already, from two institutional positions. One is Dean of the European School of Governance, which is obviously looking at governance and transformation, systemic governance, systemic transformation, as my other institutional head, being Secretary General of the International Federation of Systems Research, would suggest. This is where I'm coming from if I'm going to venture the field of more Moselle, the field of systemic wisdom. And here is a first stop where I'm starting from. Throughout all cultures that have a notion of paradise, it has the form of a garden. Paradise has the form of a garden. which again reconnects us with the theme of the two mountains, the clear water, the lush mountains, or all that comes with it. The ecology that is in harmony. I like to explore very briefly, and with no real selection, just out of a serendipity as they came into my life, three concepts, wisdom traditions that you may have heard of already. Ubuntu. So just a brief check. Who ever heard about Ubuntu? Who's familiar with Ubuntu? Quite a lot. Tianxia is a Chinese concept. Who has ever heard of Tianxia? Yes, distinctively another part of the room. And last but not least, Chamkin. Who has ever heard of Chamkin? Still a considerable amount of hands going up. I have to press here. A couple of years ago, I was exploring these three perspectives, wisdom traditions, traditions of wholeness, looking at the world, in a blog post that has been published with the European School of Governance. So this is in the slides, so they will be accessible afterwards. So if you want to explore the topic further thereafter, here is the source. I'd like to start with Ubuntu, which has obviously, since the transformation of South Africa, a bit of a career in the broad discourse. I see Mampela here in the audience, which very much helped me out when this came across my desk and in my attention. I am because we are. That is sort of the prevalent translation. And me being a systems researcher, being troubled with that. It introduces a linear causality. I am because we are. The system scientist in me had an unease with that. If it's really a wisdom tradition, it cannot be that simple. There must be much more to it. And as I learned from Mampela, there is so much more to it. And for me, what resonates strongly is what we know from the Persian poet Rumi. It relates to the drop in the sea, and the sea and the drop. That interwovenness of us in the world. We are individuals, we are a drop in the ocean, but also the entire world, the ocean we found in ourselves. And in that relationship, we're looking for balance, we're looking for harmony, we're looking at the cool arising of cool flourishing, balance, harmony. The one informs the other, and vice versa. So this is what you would find in a concept like Ubuntu, in indigenous, if we may want to say so, wisdom tradition. The embrace, the phenomenological embrace of all there is. This is, and sorry for my pronunciation, the Tianxia. Two characters, Chinese characters that symbolize the heavens and the earth, how that connects. And I'd like to read you just a line here. All living things should flourish without harming each other. All ways of life should thrive without hindering each other. Who said that? Xi Jinping, in the 5th volume of governing China. And I just took it yesterday from the news, China, is it China Daily? Yes, China Daily. And I was so surprised to say the concept, a cosmology that dates back 3,000 years, a political perspective of the wholeness of all there is, present in today's political language. I came across this through a book from Zhao Jingyang, who a couple of years ago was published in the West, informing the Western discourse a bit of what is actually the philosophical foundation even of today's political strategies in China. It dates back, as I said, 3,000 years, when King Wu, not the Emperor Wu, King Wu of the Zhao dynasty, united the Central Plains, and being the king of a small unit of that vast plain, he embarked on this understanding that whatever political cause you steer, it needs to be for all. The moment you draw a line, the moment you introduce a boundary, you create an enemy. So embrace whatever there is under the heavens and seek prosperity for all. Back to my city fellows. Social justice, prosperity, yes, but for all. Not necessarily equally distributed, but distributed so that everybody benefits. I was playing around a bit at the time, and that's in the blog post, saying, oh, we have something that is with the Ubuntu, that is embracing the vicinity, really out of the phenomenology of the lived experience. And we have the Tianxia, a cosmology that embraces the whole, all that we can perceive, not only the vicinity of our living conditions, but also what we assume to be beyond all the earth, all the heavens. As if, and this is important to state here as well, as if it is not an ontological perspective on this is how the world is. This is what informs our perspective, our understanding of the world. Not ontologically, epistemologically. How are we looking at what is around us? I'd like to move on to the next chapter. You read that right to left. No, left to right. Just the other way around. Tamkeen. And I'm so happy to have Karima Kadawi with us today, who, well, we heard earlier, the co-founder of Tamkeen Community Foundation for Human Development, invited me to be on the journey of Tamkeen in Morocco 6 years ago as what she called a mirror to the mirror, an socio-systemic complexity evaluator of the metamorphic transformation that we see in Morocco, in the communities, in the schools, and in the entire education system. There's another source on that. Beyond the magic, growing an understanding of societal metamorphosis. It's going to the magic, and this magic is twofold. If we were looking at the first two, Ubuntu and Tianxia, we use them as wisdom concepts. I would say here we're looking at a practice of growing our shared understanding of the world and experiencing a magic that comes with it. The first magic is the magic that emerges when we sit in a circle. And again, Mampela was calling it the most noble social technology that we have, sitting in a circle and co-reflecting our lived experiences, out of which grows a shared understanding. However, like in a good conversation with a friend, it's not only about the words, it's not only about the conversation. In every moment, you not only say something, but it is a reaffirmation of our relationship, our friendship with each other, growing into a deep human connection, which is present, which is felt, which ignites the magic of witness, of being together. And the other aspect of the magic that grows from that deep human relationship and the shared understanding is transformation. Any shared understanding will always inform and form our next step. It's an understanding of what is and what could grow from it. And then together we let that grow. We don't need to ask. We don't need to decide. It's the choiceless choice that allows a shared, based on that shared understanding, to grow into a more beautiful future. A future that manifests that humanity that defines and connects us, that we experienced in the circle, be it Ubuntu, be it Tamkin, be it Jianjia. Oh, that is just a characterization of such a process. It is experience-based and relationship-oriented, just the two levels. It's a process of inquiry, learning, and understanding, not knowing. An understanding that is impermanent as the world is changing. A continuous process, embedded in epistemic humility. We're not coming with a framework. We're coming with humility to learn and grow a shared understanding. Trusting our human potential and trusting our humanity. Trusting our human potential to trust our humanity. Realizing the existentiality and essentiality of love. It may be surprising at the moment if a scientist talks about something like that. But if you look at tea training, Tavistock approaches of what happens if people in a circle are together for a longer while. Yes, there will be debate. Yes, there will be arguments. But in the end, it all gravitates towards gentleness, softness, kindness. I think that's a field where we need to invest a bit more research into. I experienced that in the last 6 years on my journey with Karima and Tamkin. Again, we could, as if, having a grid, saying, oh, we have a cosmology, we have a local understanding of it, and we have something that looks like a process, as if. But all these three come together. All these three talk to each other. All these three are mirrors to each other. looking at the very same thing over and over again. We may call the same thing the Tao, something that cannot be named, and if we name it, it's not the Tao. However, it is something that we carry in our hearts. The experience, the understanding, the deep knowing about what makes us human. I like to end on that notion. For the context of this conference, moving towards action and understanding that it is our shared understanding of what is and what could grow from it that informs our actions, that informs the transformation we realize. Wisdom traditions, the three that I presented because they were present in my life, are mirrors to us growing our understanding of the world we're in and the possible next steps to take, and how to co-create the conditions for human co-flourishing and societal harmony that embraces all forms of life. Because, as all these three traditions tell us, there cannot be a separation. There is no separation. What we do to the world, we do to ourselves. What we do to ourselves, we do to the world. And this may be the question to go into the panel, asking, what is it that informs our shared understanding, from which we derive whatever we call action? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Louis. I think we're going to be showing a video contribution from Jude now. Okay.
Good afternoon. I am Dr. Jude Curravan, cosmologist, author, and co-founder of Whole Worldview. While the technological progress of science has brought substantial benefits, the worldview on which science has stood is more than a century out of date and has cost, I would suggest, humanity dearly. Its mindset was founded on a view of a solely materialistic and mechanistic world, made up of separate objects and essentially without innate meaning and purpose. This worldview has effectively dismembered our collective psyche, giving rise to what I refer to as a dis-ease of separation, a deep, often unconscious fracture in how we relate to each other and with the natural world. To truly confront the existential threats we face, we must do more than manage the symptoms of its pathology. We must heal our foundational rupture. The Club of Rome has long argued that systemic transformation must begin with a transformation of worldview. Lasting solutions must address not only the behavioural symptoms of such dis-ease, but also the deeper patterns of disconnection driving them. Now, though, evidence-based scientific findings at all scales of existence and across numerous fields of research are discovering a deeper and unitive perspective. Recognising our mutual interdependence with one another and our planetary home that they are revealing is essential to underpin and frame collective efforts. Crucially, while going beyond materialism per se, such a unitive understanding is not beyond scientific accessibility. Far from abandoning scientific rigour, its emergence is grounded in wide-ranging and empirical science and evidence. As science did with the insights of quantum mechanics and relativity theory, this also includes and transcends the previous paradigm. Now, though, and vitally, inclusive of fundamental and all-pervasive universal mind and consciousness. My recent discussion paper for the Club of Rome Fifth Element Initiative, titled The Unitive Science of a Living Universe of Innate Meaning and Purpose, sets out the evidence and comprehensive framework for this unitive science. That instead of a dead universe, bereft of meaning and purpose, describes a living universe, replete with emergent possibility and evolutionary potential. Converging with ancient and indigenous wisdom teachings and traditions, instead of the apparent separation, not only between ourselves, but also our inner and outer awareness, this unitive perspective and narrative value our inner cognition and invite the wisdom of our hearts. In doing so, they also value and honour and respect the complementarity of masculine and feminine attributes, relatedness and balanced perspectives, and thus universal unity expressed in diversity and belonging offers to guide us to a wholeness of both the inner being and outer doing of our lives, and supports us in integrating our innate health and wholeness, both individually and communally. Far more than a scientific revolution, this reframing posits a societal and cultural opportunity to consciously usher in our next steps as a species. In doing so, I suggest for further discussion and exploration, because it can inspire and empower us to remember who we really are and how we can consciously evolve, and reframe our current meta-crisis to a transformational metamorphosis. And consider how it could help our efforts, both within the Club of Rome and with our global partners, including but not limited to healing the traumas of our collective dis-ease of separation and applying that healing to reconciliation and peace building, by realizing that while each of us is unique, we truly are inseparable from and interdependent with each other and our planetary home. To transform our education into learning ecosystems, and including in terms of planetary sustainability and regeneration, and setting our interdependence and evolutionary potential within our entire universe's evolutionary story. By bringing a unitive science approach to AI and technology, innovation and innovation, and thus offering a radical re-envisaging of not only how the world is, but deeper questions of why. Its message introduces and proposes an invitation to further transdisciplinary discussion and investigation, and that its perspective and narrative and framing offer opportunities to underpin and consciously usher in our next and evolutionary steps. Thank you.
think we've just had the video. Maybe I can invite our panelists to start making their way to the stage. Okay, welcome to our panelists, our conversants. Because I read your names out a little while ago, maybe just say again who's who so people know who we have here.
I'm Sylvia Zimmerman. Well, good morning to all of you. Thank you, Julia. I am Sylvia Zimmerman del Castillo. I am the current co-president of the Club of Rome. I come from Argentina. I'm Argentinian. And well, my background, my passions, literature, philosophy, and arts.
Thank you, Sylvia.
There it works. I'm Karima. Karima means generous in Arabic. I'm deeply grateful to be here today, to be able to reflect each other's experiences and different cultures and different wisdoms and different understandings, and creating that place, that in between, that reveals the not yet thought of or the not yet imagined. And that is only possible with the widening of the heart. So thank you very much.
Hi everyone, my name is Song Qiao. I come from China and a member of the Club of Rome. I also run an organization called Wildbound based in China, and we work quite a lot all over Asia. Very happy to be here in circle, in an imaginary circle also with the wider beings all around us.
Hello everyone, my name is Stephen Hartman and I'm the Executive Director of the Bridges Coalition in UNESCO's Management of Social Transformations program. And I'm delighted to be here as well and have a chance to think about the resonance flowing out of our keynote speech today among all of the panelists here.
Yes, and I'm Louis, and following Karima's example, the name Louis means, on the surface, renowned warrior. But the deeper meaning is the one who goes first, the one who, when others are still waiting, does the first step, or just the guy who in the morning has to do the first keynote. And this is why I'm hiding at the end of the line.
I think your name committed you to the keynote without even knowing it. So having brought all of our voices into this room, I would like to just invite us to have a little bit of a reflection on what Louis shared, maybe even if there's something from Jude's presentation that resonated with you. And then we'll just have a bit of a flowing conversation before we start to engage with a little bit of Q&A with our audience. But anyone want to take up on any of the themes that Louis shared?
A beautiful and inspiring presentation, yours, Louis. And it touched me very much, very deeply, because I come from Argentina and our experience is so far away of those marvelous concepts that you presented here, because I come aware of the fact of time and the time and history. Argentina is a very, very young country, 216 years old. And it has been really a challenge to create an identity. It is said that the Argentines, we come from the ships. And we all met there in a marvelous territory, certainly, of a great beauty, empty, yet not so empty, because there were indigenous people living there, for example, the Mapuches in the south, in the Patagonia, the Onas. But the idea of these people that came from the ships was to devastate that region and to take advantage of that territory for exploitation, to exploit that land and to come back to Europe. That was the idea. So, when time went on and people that were settled in Argentina find out that they did not know where they belonged to, there became the necessity of creating a culture. So it is so important to have a cultural condition to be aware and to be able to create an ecological civilization. The relationship with the land. We did not know that relationship with the land. We didn't love the land. It was just a material to be exploited.
Thank you, Sylvia, for bringing that important point in and speaking also to the cultural history that is very specific to your own experience. Ilrima, do you want to bring in your own voice?
Yes, thank you very much. I have right now a very particular feeling. They say that fire does not know what fire is. It cannot know what it is to be burned, and it does not know what it is to give warmth. And so to know oneself, we need that mirror. And I'm so grateful to Louis because when we contacted him 6 years ago, we felt in our experience that we needed a mirror, but we needed a mirror that was looking at how things connect, how things are interdependent. A mirror that would come with a language that would allow us to grow the understanding of our own understanding. And I thank you also today because you put Ubuntu, Chancha, and Temkin as different mirrors. Though Temkin is a very contemporary today experience that found a language that resembles the experience of deep human connection. So the fire can burn you, the fire can give you light and can warm you up. The fire can reassure you. The fire also can devastate you. And this morning I was listening to the story of Hatim, who's in the village in Shawan, and he became a member of a team, Temkin. And he was telling me about fire in those villages in Shawan, the rural area, the mountainous area. And he said the fire started in one of the villages. Somebody went and burned the garbage. And we saw that the fire became wild, was not uncontrollable. He said, I turned around to my parents and I said, I'm gonna go. And we all knew, because of how bad the fire was, that we were all at risk. But I felt peace in myself. I asked for the blessing of my parents. And we went. And he said that the fire was moving and jumping. And we would be putting the fire off one place and the fire would start behind. But when the fire would start behind, we knew that we were there for one another and we would light and we would try to put off that fire. And he told me, but what was so devastating is to see the animals, how the animals were dying. And he told me about this rabbit that was burning. And he said it was running, and it was running away from its own death. It was running away from its own skin. until it dropped dead. And when it ran away from its own death, and when it ran away from its own skin, the fire further propagated. It took the fire elsewhere. And this is maybe what is happening today when we are witnessing what is happening in the world, what we witness today in the historical events, what happened in the past. Those fires, do we have someone behind us to say, I am here, we will put the fire off? Or will we be standing next to the fire and say, who is to blame? Who started this fire? Or we will say, this fire does not concern me and I will run away from that fire. These words I'm sharing right now are the words that two extraordinary peace activists from Palestine and Israel told me. He said, we only have our tears to stop the fire, but please do come with your spoon, please do come with your bucket, please do come with anything that you have. And maybe that water is the wisdom that we behold.
Thank you so much, Karima, and for bringing in that aspect also of the mirror and of the symbolism of the fire for the situation that we're facing at this moment. Song Chao, would love to hear your reflections, and also kind of wonderful to see you here as a representative also of a younger generation and a voice that needs to be part of this conversation. So please.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Louis and Jude as well, for opening us and for opening this space and time. And also I want to just echo what Karima and Sylvia has mentioned about the ocean and water and the fire, because we are in a land where water is really, really important. If you know this region of China, water is the living reality, and how to coexist with water and how water nourishes the rice here, how the canals are the means of communication, how the tea from here can go all the way to Beijing and then go to the mountains to the west and then all the way to Europe. And water has connected us. Fire in a way has empowered and enabled us, and water has made that connection, and all of that water goes into that shared understanding of all of us as water beings. And Louis talked about the shared understanding that we must have in order to take action. And I want to say it's almost a shared digestion we need to have of the time and the space we're in right now, of the discomfort of the fire that's happening in different places. How can we collectively hold such discomfort? And because not only do we need these cultural conditions for ecological well-beings, we also need to remove the barriers to ecological well-being, which is very present if you look around, and even these walls that separate us from the nature, the culture that is very abundant where we are. And even the way we're organized and some of the social technologies that are unspoken for about how things are run and how people are listening to each other. And I think sometimes the conditions of the conditions are not there. And it is one level deeper that we can look at into how do we actually cultivate and how do we nourish. And Louis mentioned the metaphor of the garden. All paradise is a garden. And I'm wondering, what is the human role in the garden? And many times we assume that we're the gardener, and many politicians claim that they're the gardener, and they're taking care of all of these different things. But actually, I think the gardener is just an assistant to the earth. Because if we leave everything out there, the rainforest will regenerate. And every land dreams of being a forest, of a whole ecosystem. And as our role of human beings, we're not saying that this plant should grow here and this water should flow there. We're co-creating, and in a way we're supporting the faster flourishing and perhaps the even more nourishment and the optimization of how nature can regenerate even faster. And if we're not providing an assistant to that, then we can step back and be in the silence and be in the observing and be in the learning and humility of non-doing, because there's a lot in the Tao that is already emerging. So a bit of just thinking that how can we collectively digest where we are, and how can we collectively find our space in the garden, and where does that action stem from? And how do we find the whole, the relational, and the community that all of our, the keynote and Jude has mentioned, is to partially remove those barriers and remove those invisible glasses that we're holding that is actually not creating the conditions that's needed.
Thank you, Songjiao. Stephen.
Yes, thanks very much. And I also really thought a lot about what Louis said about shared understanding, and it opened up to me a vision of understanding as co-creative, as not finite. There's not a finite amount of knowledge that we're just waiting to sort of achieve, but rather as something, as an unlimited space of dynamic possibility. And here I think the central theme of this conference on ecological civilization and the reconciliation of Earth, humanity, understandings, or a shared understanding of the Earth that we can help to renew in more ecologically and societally or socially responsible and sound ways is central, I think, to the mission of the Bridges Coalition, which I represent. And some people here, many people here may not know what the Bridges Coalition is, but I'll just try to say it in one sentence, that we were created to try to help to bring knowledge communities and scholarly and scientific domains that were not present enough in the science policy interface into that science policy interface. So that is the humanities, the arts, educational sciences, and local, traditional, and indigenous knowledge systems. Our mandate is to promote and find ways to encourage the inclusive or the inclusion of these knowledge systems more actively, because these represent deep reservoirs of knowledge and on which we can turn, to which we can turn in trying to find pathways forward to a resilient and sustainable Earth, humanity system. So I'd like to just sort of finish up this little iteration right now by stating one of the 5 principles on which the Bridges Coalition was founded, which I think relates to the shared understanding that what I think we hope to be able to bring to the shared understanding in this panel now and in our interactions with our partners like the Club of Rome. And it's the second principle. The Bridges Coalition partners understand the Earth not solely as a planetary system, nor as a reservoir of resources, but as a web of meanings and interactions, interdependencies, that is inherently multi-layered and pluralistic. So our mission then is to try to find ways to bring more successfully these voices, these knowledge systems, from local to regional and international levels, those voices that have not been heard enough and represent deep, deep traditions and I guess you could say reservoirs of ability and action potential into more successful coalescence with those more dominant systems. And so I hope that we'll have an opportunity to explore these kinds of ideas more.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen, and also for sharing a little bit more about how that's being actually implemented and operationalized through the work that you're doing. Louis, maybe to share a few reflections, and then I would love to invite conversation, questions with our audience as well. I think, Songjiao, you also threw out some really good questions. Maybe some people in the audience would love to reflect back on that. Over to you, Louis.
Yes, thank you very much. I briefly touch on three reflections or resonances that come with it. And the first one is really, when Karima was sharing, I was invited as a system scientist to what was happening in Morocco, the metamorphic transformation that went beyond all the prevalent theories of change, which go from A to B, but describing a autotelic process, a dialectic process that is ongoing of growing a shared understanding and the transformation that grows from it. I realized we are mirrors to each other, and looking into the mirror of Tamkeen, recognizing and realizing the system sciences in its current form brought about an in-depth discussion about its ontological, epistemological, and axiological commitments. When we talk about science, we have a tendency to go to the ontology and epistemology, but we rarely touch on the axiological commitments which are behind our sciences. What is it that we value when we do what we do? And what is it that we value in how we do what we do? And how are our values reflected in the why that brings us to do what we do? And what do we think, or what do we recognize in a science that defines itself as a science by excluding all that is not scientific? Are we back to the Tianxia, creating enemies? Is all of a sudden the so-called real world the enemy of science, and vice versa? There's something to dissolve there, and something to explore, and a commitment in what is it that we value, and how can the science that we do and how we do it become an expression of our humanity. Second, the gardener and the garden. We're saying we are the gardeners and the garden alike in Tamkeen, in recognizing social ecosystems. And what kind of gardener is that? Or what idea of gardening is that? Our sheer existence on the planet, all these billions, make a difference that makes a difference. If I walk across a meadow, I make a difference. What we call ourselves to in the mirror of these wisdom traditions is to be aware of that and seek for ways that our existence is contributing. We may call it a form of gardening, but contributing to co-create the conditions for co-flourishing of human beings with all that is living. And my last resonance, the third, digesting. We were earlier going to the circle where lived experiences are shared and co-reflected. We define trauma as a situation where an experience cannot be processed. The circle that invites the lived experiences, a safe circle, allows those experiences, not only the traumatic, but also the traumatic, to be shared, to be co-reflected, and to be digested. And in that, a safe space becomes a nourishing space. What we digest is nourishing us. And this is where I'm landing with my third reflection, is exploring the beauty and having that informing our understanding of talk. If we just talk across each other, well, there's not a lot of value in talking. But if we co-reflect the lived experiences to grow a shared understanding, that is already action.
Thank you, Louis. And I think that's a really beautiful point to transition into opening our circle here and to include some of the voices in the room, maybe whom we haven't heard from yet. And just to say that there is a kind of coming together of many worldviews and many ways of looking at the conversation that we've been having. So I think, do we have microphones? Yeah, so if anybody wants to put their hand up and introduce a thought or a question, comment into our conversation, please do. Mampela, thank you.
Can I just project? I'm very grateful to really be sitting here and listening to the different perspectives that are inviting us, not just into a circle, but into deeper meanings of words and concepts that we use. And it is here that I would like to return to Louis' reference to the three elements. And I would quote a traditional indigenous leader from Australia, who, when asked, how do we learn or how do we build a future on nature's intelligence? Nature has been at work for millions of years. How do we harness that? And his response to Lynn Gorison, who was writing a book with that title, was, we must all become indigenous again. And that is, for me, an important word or expression of wisdom that we need to bring with us. And if we remember that we all come from the continent that today is known for using the term Ubuntu, but in such an attenuated way that it violates the indigeneity and the wisdom of who we really are. And that is why I think it's very important to remember that all of us, whether we are in China or we are in Japan or we are in Argentina or we are in Canada, we all came from that understanding of what it means to be indigenous, which embraces truth, embraces justice, embraces harmony, embraces balance, embraces order, embraces propriety and reciprocity. Because our ancient ancestors learned from observing how nature operates. We are not the gardeners, as we say. We just have to benefit from watching how the garden flourishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mampela. I think we have, Sylvia would like to respond, Stephen also.
Well, Mampela, you went right to the point, and that was what I wanted to highlight in my presentation, is that we have murdered indigenous people, mostly because they were considered barbaric. And we were looking for what we supposed it was civilization. And several years ago, the Club of Rome went to the Patagonia and met Mapuches that are struggling still for their rights. And well, we went to tell them that we were working for ecology and for the environment. And the Mapuche, the chief of the Mapuches, he said, do not come to teach us what is to take care of the land, because we are the land. So we, Argentinians, as we are, we have lost that possibility of relation, direct relation with the land. And that is why we have to reconstruct ourselves from creating our own identity, including those native people that still live in the country, so as to connect with the earth. And there comes the ecological civilization we are all talking about. It is a question of connection, and it is a question of love. So what could we teach the Mapuches? They knew what land is. Thank you, Mabella.
Stephen.
Thanks, and thanks very much, Pampella, for your comment. And it also makes me think about a colleague of mine, a literary scholar whom I deeply respect, and whose work I deeply respect, but with whom I disagree sharply on one point. She has said to me more than once, the problem with thinking about the human species in the abstract is that we don't act as a species, but we act as different cultures, and that is of course true. Practically speaking, it's true. But I think it's high time we begin thinking more and connecting more as a species. And I think that that's what this conference invites us to do. It's more than necessary than ever for us to move beyond the confines of narrowly anthropocentric principles, to rethink the world's disparate human conditions, the Earth's, or to rethink other species, climates, and the Earth's biogeochemical processes, as we are all inextricably linked. And so this is, I think, the challenge that we have now, and what the challenge that this conference calls us to, is to begin thinking more about how we can come back together in the way that I think that really was at the root of what Pampella observed. And that's, yeah, I can stop there for now.
Thank you, Stephen. Louis, you wanted to bring your voice in?
Yes, I'd like to quote the German philosopher Schelling, a protege of Goethe, who once said, "In the human being, nature opens its eyes and realizes that it is." And that, combined with today's technology, is to be found in James Lovelock's last book. We communicate through the social media today like brain cells do. We have the opportunity, with all that is given to us today, to be the awareness of the biosphere with the possibility to regulate itself. However, that requires that the information, that the sharing of experiences, that the co-reflection in that network travels, that we are back to the Tiancha, that we do not fall into the trap or continue what we've been doing up to today. Think of ourselves as competing cultures. And I like, for that matter, I liked going to the species, embracing that enormous potential, but also the enormous responsibility that comes with it. And as I take it from Karima in the Arabic language, the emena, that's what we are entrusted with. We have the capacity to destroy all life on the planet. but we also have the capacity, the responsibility, the amana to be stewards and guardians of all that lives on this beautiful, beautiful planet.
Do we have any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Hi there. Sean from Singapore here. I love this panel, and I think the one thing I feel that's missing in the conversation right now is a strong point of disagreement, which I'm not going to have, right? I think that the message you've been exploring this morning has, I think, resonated with a lot of people in the room. But what about the people outside of the room? Right? I think I still have a sense of, I'm at a loss, what are the leverage points for this kind of systemic transformation? Where are these leverage points, to use systems parlance, right? Like, what are the different problems or areas we should be nudging and investing our time and energy and resources in? You know, is this reaching global elites? I mean, this is Club of Rome. Is it global elites, whether politicians, or is it the Bezos of the world, you know? Or is there hope for anything from the bottom up? Mamdani, you know, there was a lot of bottom-up interestingness going on down there. And I think there's the broader context behind this is, I think a lot of young people in the world have experienced a profound loss or absence of meaning and purpose in a world that they see is fragmenting before their eyes. And I think that these feelings are being leveraged by elites right now already. And I guess that's the context for asking about where these leverage points, where do you feel these leverage points might exist?
Thank you. That's a great question that I think we could have a whole conversation on. But let's turn it back to our panel to see if anybody wants to respond to that. This idea of leverage points, bringing what could feel a little bit ethereal and introspective. There's always this call, what do we do with this? How do we bring this into the world at different levels? So I'd be very curious to hear responses. Karima, we haven't heard from you in a bit.
Thank you so much for your question. I love not only the question, but how you asked that question. If you have, it's a bit like thinking of, going back to what you were saying, you started with the ocean, the water, the navigation. We tend to look for things that we can hold, that are material. And if I keep on looking for something that is material, I will miss out on something else that is immaterial, but that substantiates all. I remember not long ago, I was with the top management of education system, and who are going through very, very tough year because it's a political year. There are objectives to attain. There are political pressures, and there's a lot of pressure. Hence, chaos also coming with that pressure. Like lack of meaning. So I proposed for them to stand on a certain line, and I said, this is the structure in which you operate, these two lines. But we're going to bring in different organization principles. So you're going to reorganize every time. And they were very trusting, and we were able to have that experience together. So I said, okay, now the organization principle is going to be your age. So to organize yourself from the youngest to the oldest. So they started to move. The structure was very narrow. They started to move, looking at each other, assessing the ones who knew each other. And actually they managed with that, and they could not talk. So they organized themselves from older to younger. And I said, okay, now the organizing principle is the tallest to the shortest. So again, so they look at each other, like they start organizing, and then they did not know whether they managed to succeed or not. So one had to move out from the structure to look at what came out, and reorganize a little bit and came back. And I kept on going like that, and at one point, I said, okay, now the organizing structure, the organizing principle is how much love you have in you. Instantaneously, they left the structure, They created a circle and they put their hands like this. And it was a moment of inflection. A moment of inflection where it's kind of elevated everything. They did not know what they knew. And that I go back to the knowing of the heart, something that you recognize. You know, when you hear wisdom, you recognize it, but it's the wisdom you behold. When you experience beauty, when you see beauty, it's an experience. It's the beauty you behold that is seeing that beauty. So this is, if we're looking for leverage points, if we're looking for an organizing structure, for something that is water, and water, if I have water here and I do this, it goes. You know what Hetim, the young man I was sharing, told me? He said, people saw their cattle burned. Some of them got burnt and still were helping their neighbors. Even their shoes, not everything went. But we went back to something that went beyond, we are different tribes here. We went back to an organizing principle. That organizing principle is called Tiwizi. It's an Amazigh language. The indigenous people from Morocco are Amazigh. You know what Amazigh means? The free people. And the Tiwizi, what does it mean? It means mutual help, mutual cooperation. So the ones who still had cattle said, I will give you my sheep. And she's pregnant. Then when you have more sheep, come back. The ones the next day, they said, let's start building together. Let's start painting each other's house. There is something quite extraordinary in the human being. And when you are connecting to that kind of connection to the self, there is a moment of awe where that self is greater than the self. It's the self of Ubuntu. It's the self that we are all under one heaven. It's the self of what the word humanity. Whom is earth, humanity, humus, the same etymology, the root, going back to where we were all one, like what Jude was reminding us. Thank you.
Thank you, Karima. I think we've got about 5 minutes to bring this to an end. I see Sankhya, you haven't spoken in a bit, and Louis as well, and then I think we'll wrap it up. Why don't we give you the last word, because I'm noticing that you're holding East and West in a very particular way here, going between China and the UK. So Louis, and then wrap it up.
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you, Karima. You brought it all together. Back in Germany in the 1980s, there has been a bumper sticker, very famous, saying, imagine it was war and nobody attending. Which brings me back to the power of global civil society. Why are we playing these games? Why are we attending there? Why we do what we do? What do we follow? And I like how Karima went to the knowing of the heart. I once were in charge of facilitating, so the lead facilitator for a systems conference, 5 days long. And so I was opening in the morning, sending people for lunch and into the breaks, and wrapping up in the evening. And every time I came with one message saying, we have people here in the conference who know each other for long, but we have new ones we do not yet know. So seize all the opportunities which are there to approach people you do not know yet and ask them how they are and what brought them to the conference. What happened to the conference? Without permission, which was not really meant as such. People went to explore who's there, went to each other. And the feedback I got as a lead facilitator, oh, you ruined the entire conference. It was not about science anymore. It was all loving, hugging, and people were carried away in their small conversations. Yes, they were, making sense together, co-reflecting their lived experiences, and exploring their deep human relationships, the new friendships that grew. And this is ending on what Karima was saying. This is something we can trust. This is the human nature. And if we bridge that to what can we do? What can a Club of Rome do? Be that convener for a global civil society. Do what we are doing right here, right now. Bring people together, trusting our human potential and trusting our humanity to grow a shared understanding that guides us on our path in the future.
Thank you, Louis. Songqiao?
Thank you, Julia. There was a lot of pressure at the moment. And thank you, Sean, for bringing that point of disagreement and discomfort, because I feel like I've definitely been sitting in the discomfort for a while. Partially looking at the title of the conference here, that the English says Earth, Humanity, Reconciliation, the Chinese says Earth, Humanity, Harmony, and co-evolution. So partially that's, holding these different languages and these different way of knowing together and trying to understand, if we're talking about Earth, Humanity, Reconciliation, should we not have Earth in the room? And whether, is it more about humanity, reconciliation we're talking about the different ways of knowing and being? And partially is that this question of a leverage point, because who's exerting the force for the leverage? And what is that force impacting? And where is that felt? And what does the Club of Rome have to do in all of this? And being a relatively new member, I have to say, I am also sitting in a bit of a caterpillar soup of what is emerging in this conference, but also in the wider world. And I think people come to the Club of Rome with projections, expectations about what the Club of Rome has done before and what it needs to do now. And normally, I am not the youngest person in the communities I work with, and somehow I became the youngest person in this community. And there's also a particular perspective that, as mirrors of each other, that I also feel, oh, this might be how some of the younger folks in my community feel like when I am holding a particular discomfort. And when the Club of Rome is holding a particular level of discomfort, and perhaps this is how we're holding for the rest of the world, and the rest of the world perhaps denies to hold, or ignores, or turns back, or finds other ways to distract. So I think it's crucial for us to be able to hold these discomfort and these not knowing, because I would hope that we actually learn more the art of dwelling in that, rather than coming up with messages and reports right away, because we have done that 50 years ago. And we have put messages out there, and almost everybody has a message for the Bezos, for the elites, but really, who are we trying to be in dialogue with, and who should we actually learn for that essence-to-essence relationship, for that humanity-based, for that heart-based knowing? It may not be the people who create the conditions that actually created a lot of suffering and the conditions for degeneration of the earth. So partially, I would love to have more of what you have facilitated, Louis, in the spaces that we all operate. Because if Jude was talking about we have this ease of separation, because we're not comfortable in that. We're more comfortable in the relating. We're more comfortable in actually speaking from the essence of who we are, rather than just what we do or what message we've got and what action points we have for the next moment, so we know how to save the planet. And we've got a room of really smart people, and I have to say, we all have the humility of knowing that we don't have all the answers, and we have to sit through some of these discomfort together for the transformation to happen. And some of that transformation is really, really subtle, invisible, and quiet. And if we don't become silent and listen, then we will completely ignore that, because there are lots of voices and messages out there in the boardrooms at the UN. When Xi and Trump were meeting a few days ago, that was all around us. But I think we need to cultivate the ear for listening in the silence and in listening in the quietness of what is emerging, because everything doesn't happen right away. There's always a coming together. When the storm is starting, it's just starting from just some wind blowing. And I think we need to cultivate the courage to be able to listen to the wind of hope in the midst of chaos. And I feel like that's what young people in this disconnection, in a way that they have to disconnect with what is so loud right now to be able to tune into the silence, and for us to be able to get back into the body, into the heart, into the digestion. So yeah, that's what
Thank you so much for that. I don't think there was a good reason why we left your voice to the end. We're going to go into tea, and there's more time to interact with each other and with these speakers. And the session afterwards will be the material factors that are required to move towards ecological well-being. So I hope some of the resonance from this conversation may inform what comes next. So a big round of applause to our panelists again. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much to Julia as moderator, to all the panelists, and also to Jude. We will thank her for recording intervention. Very interesting conversation, which should take much more time. I think we will stay with your questions and this exploration of how do we deal, how do we stay, how do we navigate the uncertainty, the complexity, and hold that without running into simplistic responses. But I think that was a very good illustration of what I said at the beginning, these different lenses from where we look at the same fundamental questions. It will be very interesting to see now, after the break, we'll have this perspective of the material conditions with a special address by Chandra Nair, and then a panel. For now, tea break. Makes sense, we are in China, this is tea break, which, by the way, I love because I'm a fan of tea. I never drink coffee. And a very down-to-earth thing, it's that we are missing, the organization is missing 2 translation devices from yesterday. If by chance you forgot to give them back the one you used, please, or you find them somewhere, they will be grateful. But let's, for now, enjoy the tea break and, of course, the conversations. Thank you.